The dust from the stagecoach had barely settled when Sarah Mitchell collapsed onto the wooden bench outside Redemption's general store, her swollen belly straining against the faded calico dress that no longer fit properly, and the whispers started before she could catch her breath. It was June of 1878 in western Texas, and the heat bore down mercilessly on the small town that sat between cattle country and the unforgiving desert, a place where secrets spread faster than wildfire, and a woman alone with child was already damned. But a woman with 2 babies growing inside her and no ring on her finger might as well have worn a scarlet letter. She pressed a trembling hand to her abdomen, feeling the familiar flutter of movement that reminded her she was not truly alone, even if the father of her children had vanished into the night 6 months ago with her savings and whatever dignity she had left. The journey from San Antonio had been brutal. 3 days of rattling bones and judgmental stares from the other passengers who had shifted away from her as though her condition might be contagious. Sarah had hoped that distance might grant her some measure of anonymity, that perhaps in a smaller town she could invent a widowed past and raise her babies without the weight of shame crushing her spirit. But she could already see the curtains twitching in the windows across the dirt road and feel the eyes assessing her, calculating her sins. "You need some water, miss?" The voice was deep and gentle, and when Sarah looked up, she had to shield her eyes against the sun to see the man standing before her. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of aged whiskey. His clothes marked him as a working man, dusty denim and a worn leather vest, with a bandana tied loosely around his neck. But it was his expression that caught her off guard, no judgment or disgust. Just honest concern etched into the lines of his sun-weathered face. "I would be grateful," Sarah managed, her throat dry as cotton. She watched as he disappeared into the store and returned moments later with a tin cup filled with cool water from the pump. His hands were calloused but steady as he passed it to her, and she noticed he wore no wedding band. "Thank you, mister," she began, but he waved off the formality. "Just call me Cole. Cole Maddox. I work at the Double R Ranch about 5 miles north of here." He settled onto the bench beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "You just arrive on the stage?" Sarah nodded, draining the cup gratefully. "I did. I am Sarah Mitchell, and I'm looking for a place to stay, perhaps some work, if anyone will have me." She saw no point in hiding her condition. It was as obvious as the nose on her face. "Though I imagine opportunities are limited for someone in my situation." Cole studied her for a long moment, and she braced herself for the inevitable questions or the polite excuse that would send him on his way. Instead, he surprised her. "Mrs. Henderson runs a boarding house on Oak Street. She is a fair woman, does not judge too quickly. As for work, my boss's wife could use help at the ranch house. She is getting on in years, and the housework has gotten to be too much." "I am not married," Sarah said quietly. Deciding honesty was better than building a foundation of lies. "And I know what people think of women like me. If your employer is a respectable family, I doubt they would want someone of questionable character in their home." "People think a lot of things that are not worth the breath it takes to speak them," Cole replied, his voice firm. "My mama raised me to believe that circumstances do not define character, and that mercy matters more than judgment. If you are willing to work hard and need a fresh start, then I reckon Texas is as good a place as any to find it." Something in his words made Sarah's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. It had been so long since anyone had shown her kindness without wanting something in return, so long since she had felt anything other than the crushing weight of her mistakes. "Why are you being nice to me? You do not even know me." Cole stood and adjusted his hat, the corner of his mouth lifting in something that was not quite a smile. "Maybe that is exactly why I can be nice to you. I do not know your story, and I figure it is not my place to judge it. Come on, let me walk you to Mrs. Henderson's place. You should not be standing in this heat any longer than necessary, not in your condition." As they walked down the dusty main street, Sarah became acutely aware of the stares following them. Women clutching their shawls tighter as if virtue itself could be stolen. Men looking her up and down with expressions that made her skin crawl. Cole seemed oblivious, or perhaps simply chose not to acknowledge the attention, keeping up a steady stream of conversation about the town, pointing out the church and the schoolhouse, the blacksmith shop and the saloon. By the time they reached a neat white house with a painted sign declaring it Henderson's boarding house, Sarah felt marginally less terrified of her new surroundings. Mrs. Henderson turned out to be a stout woman in her 60s with sharp blue eyes and silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked Sarah over with the assessing gaze of someone who had seen every type of trouble walk through her door and was not easily shocked. "How far along are you, girl?" "Nearly 6 months, ma'am," Sarah answered, lifting her chin despite the shame that wanted to bow her head. "And before you ask, no, there is no husband coming to join me. I can pay for a room for 2 weeks, and I'm hoping to find work before my money runs out. Can you cook, clean, sew?" Mrs. Henderson fired off the questions like bullets. "Yes, ma'am, all 3. I am a hard worker, I promise you that." The older woman's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I have a small room at the back of the house. It is not much, but it is clean and private. Rent is $3 a week, meals included. If you can help with the cooking and cleaning, I will knock it down to 2. Relief flooded through Sarah so powerfully she felt dizzy. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Do not thank me yet. There are rules. No men in your room, no drinking, no causing trouble. I run a respectable establishment, and I will not have gossip painting my house in a bad light. You keep to yourself, do your share of work, and we will get along fine." Mrs. Henderson glanced at Cole, who had been standing quietly by the door. "Cole Maddox, your mama would be proud to see you helping this girl. You are always a good boy." "Just trying to do right, Mrs. Henderson," Cole said, tipping his hat to both women. He turned to Sarah, and there was something in his gaze that made her heart skip unexpectedly. "I will talk to Mrs. Calloway at the ranch about that work. Come by the Double R tomorrow morning if you're feeling up to it. Just follow the north road out of town. You cannot miss it." After he left, Sarah settled into her small room, which contained a narrow bed, a washstand, and a wooden chair. It was sparse, but infinitely better than the uncertain future she had been facing just hours before. She sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself for the first time in weeks to cry, not from despair, but from the overwhelming relief of finding even this small measure of kindness in a harsh world. The next morning, Sarah borrowed a sunbonnet from Mrs. Henderson and made the walk to the Double R Ranch. The summer heat was already building, and by the time she reached the sprawling property with its sturdy ranch house and network of corrals and outbuildings, her dress was damp with perspiration. She found Cole near the barn, working with a beautiful chestnut horse that danced nervously at the end of a long rope. "Easy now, easy," he murmured to the animal, his voice low and soothing. "Nobody is going to hurt you, girl. We are just getting to know each other." He noticed Sarah approaching and smiled, though he did not break his concentration on the horse. "Give me just a minute here. She is a new acquisition, still learning to trust." Sarah watched, fascinated, as Cole worked with the horse, his movements patient and deliberate. There was something mesmerizing about the way he communicated with the animal, all gentle confidence and steady reassurance. After several more minutes, the horse had calmed considerably, and Cole led her back into the barn before joining Sarah. "You are good with her," Sarah observed. "Horses are a lot like people," Cole replied, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Most of the time when they are scared or acting difficult, it is because someone hurt them or let them down. They just need time and patience to remember they can trust again." He gestured toward the ranch house. "Come on, let me introduce you to Mrs. Calloway." The ranch house was larger than Sarah had expected, a solid 2-story structure built from the good timber and Texas stone. Inside, it was surprisingly elegant, with polished wood floors and furniture that spoke of both prosperity and taste. Mrs. Calloway turned out to be a handsome woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone accustomed to running a household efficiently. "So you are the young woman Cole mentioned," Mrs. Calloway said, gesturing for Sarah to sit in the parlor. "He tells me you need work and that you are a capable hand with domestic duties." "Yes, ma'am, I can cook, clean, do laundry, mend clothes, whatever you need." Sarah hesitated, then decided to address the obvious. I should tell you that I am expecting, and before too long I will need time for the birth. The doctor in San Antonio said I'm carrying twins, which means I might be larger and more uncomfortable than most women at this stage. Mrs. Calloway's eyebrows rose. Twins? Gracious. And the father? Gone, Sarah said simply, and not coming back. There was a long pause during which Sarah prepared herself for rejection, but Mrs. Calloway surprised her. My own daughter found herself in a similar situation 10 years ago. Her young man died in a riding accident before they could marry, and she was left to raise her son alone. I watched how this community treated her, the whispers and the judgment, and I swore then that I would never be so cruel to another woman facing such hardship. She leaned forward, her gaze direct. I will hire you, Sarah. The work is not easy, but I will pay fairly and give you a place to stay here on the ranch if you prefer. There is a small cottage out back that we use for hired help. It has its own kitchen and bedroom, and it would give you more space than a boarding house room. Sarah felt tears prickling her eyes for the second time in as many days. I do not know what to say. Your generosity is more than I could have hoped for. Say you will work hard and take care of yourself and those babies. Mrs. Calloway replied, When is your time due? The doctor said late September, possibly early October. Then we have some time to prepare. You can start next week if that suits you. Cole can help you move your things from town. Over the following weeks, Sarah settled into a rhythm at the Double R Ranch. The work was indeed demanding. Cooking meals for the ranch hands, maintaining the main house, helping Mrs. Calloway with the endless tasks that came with running a large household. But it was honest work, and Sarah found satisfaction in it. More than that, she found herself looking forward to the moments when Cole would stop by the kitchen for coffee or appear at dinner with the other ranch hands. He was different from any man she had known. He did not try to charm her with empty flattery or make crude jokes at her expense like some of the other cowboys did when they thought she could not hear. Instead, he talked to her like a person, asking about her day, sharing stories about the horses he was training, listening when she spoke as though her words actually mattered. Sometimes in the evenings after the work was done, they would sit on the porch of her cottage and watch the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Why are you not married? Sarah asked him one evening in late July. The question had been nagging at her for weeks. Cole was handsome, hard-working, kind, exactly the sort of man women should be lining up to marry. He was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. I was engaged once, about 3 years ago. Her name was Elizabeth. She was beautiful and smart, daughter of a banker in Austin. But when it came down to it, she did not want the life I could offer her. She wanted city living, society parties, all the things that come with money. I am just a cowboy, Sarah. I work with my hands, and I probably always will. That was not good enough for her. Then she was a fool, Sarah said firmly. There is more honor in an honest day's work than in all the society parties in Texas. Cole looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in the air between them. You mean that? Of course I mean it. You are one of the best men I have ever known, Cole Maddox, and I've only known you a few weeks. Any woman would be lucky to have you. Any woman? He asked softly, and there was a question in his eyes that made Sarah's heart race. She looked down at her hands, at her swollen belly that made sitting comfortably nearly impossible these days. I am hardly in a position to be thinking about such things. I made my choices, and now I am living with the consequences. What if I told you I do not see it that way? Cole moved closer, and Sarah could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that always clung to him. What if I told you that every day I watch you working hard, being brave, facing down a world that wants to judge you, and I think you're the strongest person I have ever met? What if I told you that somewhere along the way I started falling in love with you? Sarah's breath caught in her throat. You cannot mean that. Cole, I am pregnant with another man's children. I have nothing to offer you but scandal and shame. You are pregnant with 2 babies who are going to need a father, Cole said, his voice steady and sure. And I am a man who has enough love to give all 3 of you. If you will let me." "People will talk," Sarah whispered, even as hope began to bloom dangerously in her chest. "Let them talk. I do not care." Cole took her hand, his touch warm and solid. "Sarah Mitchell, I am not asking you to love me back right this minute. I know you have been hurt, and I know trust does not come easy. But I am asking you to give me a chance. Let me court you properly. Let me show you that not all men are like the one who left you. And when you are ready, if you are ever ready, marry me. Let me give those babies my name and raise them as my own." "Cole," Sarah began, but he gently pressed a finger to her lips. "You do not have to answer now. Just think about it. I will be here, Sarah. I am not going anywhere." In the days that followed, Sarah found herself watching Cole with new eyes. She noticed the way he always made sure she had a chair when she needed to rest, how he would carry heavy loads without being asked, how he spoke to her with unfailing respect and gentleness. She watched him with the horses and saw the same patience he showed her, the same willingness to give trust time to grow. And slowly, carefully, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this second chance. By mid-August, Sarah's feelings had crystallized into something undeniable. She was in love with Cole Maddox, loved him with a depth that surprised her because it was nothing like the shallow infatuation she had felt for the man who had fathered her children. This was something real and solid, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. When he came to her cottage one evening with wildflowers he had picked on the range, she took his hand and said the words that had been building in her heart. "Yes. My answer is yes. I will marry you, Cole, if you are truly sure this is what you want." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hand. "Sarah Mitchell, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." "Then they will have my name by Sunday morning," Cole declared, pulling her gently into his arms. "I will talk to Reverend Walsh tomorrow. We will make this official, make you and these babies mine in the eyes of God and the law." True to his word, Cole arranged everything with remarkable speed. Reverend Walsh agreed to perform the ceremony that Sunday at the small church in Redemption. Mrs. Calloway and Mrs. Henderson both wept with joy at the news and immediately set about helping Sarah prepare. Mrs. Calloway produced a beautiful cream-colored dress that she altered to fit Sarah's expanded figure, while Mrs. Henderson baked a cake and spread the word that this was a wedding to be celebrated, not whispered about. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, the heat tempered by a rare breeze that made the day feel almost magical. Sarah stood in the small room behind the church, her hands trembling as Mrs. Calloway fastened the tiny pearl buttons on the dress. Through the open window she could hear the murmur of voices as people gathered. She was terrified that no one would come, that the church would be empty except for the few kind souls who had shown her mercy. But when the doors opened and she walked down the aisle on Mr. Calloway's arm, he had insisted on giving her away. Sarah saw that the pews were filled. Ranch hands from the Double R sat alongside shopkeepers from town. Mrs. Henderson was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, and even some of the women who had stared at her with judgment that first day had come, perhaps curious, perhaps softened by the romance of it all. And there at the altar stood Cole, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him in a pressed suit, his eyes bright with emotion as he watched her approach. When she reached his side, he took her hand and squeezed it gently, a silent promise that he was there and would not let go. Reverend Walsh began the ceremony, his voice resonant in the small church. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Cole Maddox and Sarah Mitchell in holy matrimony. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted by God." Sarah barely heard the words. her entire focus on Cole's face, on the absolute certainty she saw there. When it came time for the vows, his voice was strong and clear. I, Cole Maddox, take you, Sarah Mitchell, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in prosperity and in hardship, from this day forward until death parts us. I promise to be a father to your children, to raise them as my own, and to build with you a life founded on faith, trust, and love. Sarah's voice shook with emotion as she repeated her own vows. I, Sarah Mitchell, take you, Cole Maddox, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, in prosperity and in hardship, from this day forward until death parts us. I promise to be a faithful wife, to stand by your side, and to build with you a life founded on faith, trust, and love. When Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, Cole's kiss was gentle and reverent, a sealing of the promises they had just made. The church erupted in applause, and Sarah realized she was crying again, but this time from pure joy. The celebration that followed at the ranch was more festive than Sarah could have imagined. Tables had been set up under the trees laden with food that the neighboring ranchers and townspeople had contributed. There was music and dancing, and for the first time since her troubles began, Sarah felt truly welcomed, truly part of a community. She watched Cole moving among the guests, shaking hands and accepting congratulations, and marveled that this good man was now her husband. As the sun began to set and the party wound down, Cole led Sarah to the cottage that was now their home. He had spent the past few days fixing it up, adding curtains to the windows, building a cradle that sat waiting in the corner, ready for its future occupants. Mrs. Maddox, he said, testing out her new name with a grin. How does it feel to be a married woman? Like a dream I'm afraid to wake up from, Sarah admitted. She moved into his arms, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. Cole, I need you to know something. What I feel for you is nothing like what I felt for him. This is real. You are real. And I love you more than I knew it was possible to love another person. Cole tilted her face up to his expression tender. I know, sweetheart. I can see it in your eyes, hear it in your voice. We are going to have a good life together, Sarah. I promise you that. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Sarah felt a strong kick from one of the babies. Cole's hand was resting on her belly, and he laughed in wonder. They are active tonight. They know they have a father now, Sarah murmured sleepily. They know they are loved. The final weeks of Sarah's pregnancy were both difficult and joyful. By early September, she was so large that even simple tasks became challenging. Cole was endlessly patient, helping her with everything from putting on her shoes to getting comfortable in bed at night. He talked to her belly constantly, telling the baby stories about the ranch, singing them old cowboy songs in his rumbling baritone, promising them all the adventures they would have together. Dr. Morrison, who had been monitoring Sarah's condition, warned them that twin births could be complicated and that they should be prepared for anything. Cole arranged for the doctor to stay at the ranch as Sarah's time drew near, and Mrs. Calloway set up a proper birthing room in the main house, declaring that she wanted to be nearby to help. On the last day of September, just as the brutal Texas summer was finally giving way to cooler autumn weather, Sarah woke before dawn with the first contractions. She gripped Cole's arm, trying to stay calm. It is time. Cole was out of bed instantly, pulling on his clothes and helping Sarah into her dressing gown. I am going to get Dr. Morrison and Mrs. Calloway. You just breathe, sweetheart. Everything is going to be fine. The next several hours were a blur of pain and fear and determination. Labor with twins was every bit as difficult as Dr. Morrison had warned, and there were moments when Sarah was certain she could not continue, that her body would simply give out under the strain. But every time doubt crept in, Cole was there, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragements that somehow gave her strength to push through. "You are the strongest woman I have ever known," he told her, his voice thick with emotion. "You can do this, Sarah. I am right here with you." At 3:30 in the afternoon, their first child entered the world with a lusty cry that filled the room with hope. "It is a boy," Dr. Morrison announced, placing the squalling infant on Sarah's chest. "A healthy boy." Sarah cradled her son, overwhelmed by the rush of love that flooded through her. He was red-faced and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. But there was no time to rest. The second baby was coming. 20 minutes later, after a final exhausting push, their daughter was born, smaller than her brother, but equally vocal. "Two beautiful babies," Mrs. Calloway said, tears streaming down her face as she helped clean and swaddle the infants. "Congratulations, Sarah. You did wonderfully." Cole was staring at his new son and daughter with an expression of absolute awe when Dr. Morrison finally allowed him to hold them. He cradled one in each arm as though they were made of the finest glass. "They are perfect," he whispered. "Sarah, they are absolutely perfect." "They are ours," Sarah said, exhausted but happier than she had ever been. "Our family." In the days that followed, Sarah and Cole settled into the chaotic, exhausting, beautiful reality of life with newborn twins. They named the boy James, after Cole's father, and the girl Emma, after Sarah's mother. The babies were good-natured for the most part, though they seemed to have developed a system where if one was sleeping, the other was surely awake and demanding attention. Cole proved to be a natural father. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor at night with a fussy baby, and seemed completely unfazed by the mess and noise that came with infants. Sarah would often wake in the night to find him in the rocking chair with both babies, one cradled in each arm, singing them softly back to sleep. The community that had once judged Sarah now embraced her family. Neighbors stopped by with gifts and offers of help. The women who had whispered about her pregnancy now cooed over the twins and shared advice about motherhood. It seemed that Cole's public declaration of love and commitment had shifted the narrative, transforming Sarah from a fallen woman into a devoted wife and mother who had found redemption through love. As autumn deepened into winter, Sarah marveled at how completely her life had transformed. A year ago, she had been alone, frightened, convinced her future held nothing but struggle and shame. Now she had a husband who loved her unconditionally, 2 healthy children, a home, and a community that accepted her. It felt like a miracle, like something out of a fairy tale rather than the harsh reality of the Wild West. One evening in late November, after the babies were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Cole and Sarah sat together on their porch, wrapped in a quilt against the chill. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by any city lights, and the silence of the range was peaceful rather than lonely. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked quietly, "taking on me and the babies, dealing with all the gossip and judgment?" Cole pulled her closer, his arms solid around her shoulders. "Not for 1 second. Sarah, you and James and Emma are the best things that ever happened to me. I thank God every day that you got off that stagecoach in Redemption, that I was there to offer you water, that you gave me a chance to prove myself." "I am the one who should be thanking God," Sarah replied. "You saved me, Cole. You saved all of us." "We saved each other," Cole corrected gently. "You gave me purpose, a family, something worth working for beyond just the next paycheck. You taught me what real love looks like, the kind that is not based on convenience or social standing, but on genuine respect and partnership." "I love you so much it scares me sometimes," Sarah confessed. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this happiness to be taken away." Cole kissed the top of her head. "Nothing is going to take this away. We built this together, on a foundation of honesty and commitment. That is not something that crumbles easily. We are going to grow old together, Sarah. We are going to watch our children grow up. Maybe add a few more babies to the mix if you are willing. We are going to build something lasting." As winter gave way to spring and the Texas landscape burst into bloom, life on the Double R continued its steady rhythm. James and Emma grew from tiny infants into chubby, active babies who filled the house with laughter and chaos. Cole continued his work with the horses, building a reputation as one of the finest trainers in the region. Sarah balanced motherhood with her household duties, finding joy in both roles. Mr. Calloway, impressed by Cole's dedication and skill, made him a partner in the ranch that spring, giving him a share of the profits and more responsibility in the operation. It meant more security for their growing family and recognition of Cole's years of hard work. The night they received the news, Cole swept Sarah into his arms and spun her around despite her protest that she was too heavy. "We are going to build our own house," he declared, "a real home, with enough room for our family to grow. What do you say, Mrs. Maddox?" "I say yes," Sarah laughed. "I say yes to all of it, to everything life with you brings." They broke ground on the new house in May, choosing a spot on the edge of the ranch property with views of the open range and the distant hills. Cole did much of the work himself with help from the other ranch hands, building a sturdy two-story home with a wide porch and plenty of windows to let in light. By the time James and Emma celebrated their first birthday in September of 1879, the house was finished and the Maddox family moved in. The twins' first birthday party was a joyous affair, with half the county turning out to celebrate. Sarah watched James toddle around on chubby legs, investigating everything with fearless curiosity, while Emma preferred to observe from the safety of her father's arms, taking everything in with solemn blue eyes. They were different as night and day, but both were clearly thriving, happy children secure in the love of their parents. That night, after the last guest had left and the babies were tucked into their new nursery, Sarah stood in the doorway of the bedroom she shared with Cole and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. The room was simple but comfortable, furnished with a large bed Cole had built himself, a dresser that had been a wedding gift from the Calloways, and curtains Sarah had sewn from fabric Mrs. Henderson had helped her choose. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I'm thinking about how far we have come," Sarah said softly. "How different my life is now compared to what I thought it would be. Do you remember that first day when I got off the stagecoach? I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Cole said. "Even exhausted and scared, there was something about you that drew me in. I knew in that moment I wanted to know you, to help you if I could. You did more than help me. You gave me everything." Sarah turned in his arms to face him. "Cole, I want to give you something too. Another baby, one that is ours from the start." Cole's eyes widened. "Sarah, are you saying—" "I am saying I want to have your child," Sarah confirmed. "James and Emma will always be ours, always be yours in every way that matters, but I want to give you a baby that you get to experience from the very beginning, from the first flutter of movement to the first cry." "Are you sure? Carrying twins was so hard on you, and we have our hands full as it is." "I am sure," Sarah said firmly. "I want our family to grow. I want more children running through this house, more laughter and chaos and love." Cole kissed her then, long and deep, a kiss full of promise and passion. "Then let's give them some brothers and sisters," he murmured against her lips. By Christmas of that year, Sarah was pregnant again, and this time there was no fear or shame, only joy and anticipation. She carried differently this time, smaller and neater, and Dr. Morrison assured them it was likely just one baby. The pregnancy was easier than her first, perhaps because she was not dealing with the stress and uncertainty that had plagued her before, or perhaps simply because carrying one child was less taxing than two. Cole was even more attentive this time around, if that were possible. He insisted Sarah rest more, took over more of the childcare duties with the twins, and spent his evenings with his hand on her growing belly, feeling for kicks and talking to the baby. "Your big brother and sister are going to love you so much," he would say, "and your mama and I already love you more than words can say. You are going to be born into a family that will always be there for you, that will always have your back no matter what." Their son was born on a beautiful morning in late May of 1880, an easier birth than the twins had been, and Sarah wept with joy as Cole cut the cord and the baby was placed in her arms. He had Cole's dark hair and Sarah's nose, and from the start he was a calm, content baby who seemed perfectly happy just to observe the world around him. "What should we name him?" Sarah asked, stroking the baby's soft cheek. Cole looked thoughtful. "What about Thomas? It was my grandfather's name. He was a good man, taught me everything I know about horses and honor." "Thomas Maddox," Sarah tested the name. "It is perfect." With 3 children under the age of 2, life in the Maddox household was wonderfully chaotic. James was all boy, constantly getting into mischief and keeping Sarah on her toes. Emma was quieter but clever, always watching and learning. And little Thomas was the easy baby, content to be passed from sibling to sibling, perfectly comfortable with the constant noise and activity. Cole expanded the ranch operations, buying more land and building his horse training business. His reputation grew throughout Texas, and people came from as far as Austin and San Antonio to buy horses he had trained. The increased income meant security for their family and opportunities Sarah had never dreamed possible. As the years passed, the Maddox family continued to grow. In 1882, Sarah gave birth to another daughter, Margaret, who had her father's whiskey-colored eyes and a stubborn streak a mile wide. In 1884, they welcomed another son, William, who was born during a spring thunderstorm and seemed to carry that energy with him into the world. By 1885, 7 years after that fateful day when Sarah had arrived in Redemption, the Maddox family was well established in the community. Cole was respected as both a rancher and a horseman, while Sarah had become known for her kindness and her work with other women in difficult situations. She never forgot what it felt like to be alone and judged, and she made it her mission to ensure no other woman in Redemption faced that same isolation. One evening in June, after the children were all in bed and the house was finally quiet, Sarah and Cole sat on their porch swing watching the sun set over the range. Cole's arm was around Sarah's shoulders and her head rested against his chest, the position as comfortable and familiar as breathing. "Do you ever think about him?" Cole asked quietly. "The man who fathered James and Emma." It was a question he had never asked before, and Sarah considered it carefully. "Not really," she admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if he ever thinks about what he walked away from, if he knows he has 2 amazing children in the world, but mostly I just feel grateful that things worked out the way they did. If he had stayed, if he had married me, I would never have met you. I would never have known what real love feels like." "James and Emma do not remember him at all," Cole said. "As far as they are concerned, I am their father. I am the only father they have ever known." "You are their father," Sarah said firmly. "Biology does not make a family, Cole. Love does. You loved them before they were even born, claimed them as yours when you had no obligation to do so. You are more their father than he could ever be." "I cannot imagine my life without them," Cole said. "Without any of our children. They are all mine, Sarah, every single one of them." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had started as a desperate, frightened woman with no options and no hope, carrying the children of a man who had abandoned her. She had been prepared for a life of struggle and shame, for judgment and isolation. Instead, she had found Cole, a cowboy with a heart big enough to love not just her but the children she carried, a man willing to stand against social convention and claim them all as his own. He had promised her that her babies would have his name by Sunday morning, and he had kept that promise, giving them not just a name but a father's unwavering love and devotion. From that unlikely beginning, they had built something beautiful, a family founded on love and respect, a home filled with laughter and warmth, a life richer than anything Sarah had once dared to dream. The twins who had been born into uncertainty were now confident, happy children who knew they were loved and wanted. And the younger children had been born into a family already strong and secure, benefiting from the foundation their parents had worked so hard to build. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Sarah replied. "How blessed we are. I am thinking about that day 7 years ago when I stumbled off that stagecoach, sick and scared and alone, and you offered me water and kindness. I am thinking about how one small act of compassion changed the entire course of my life." "Our lives," Cole corrected. "You changed mine just as much as I changed yours, Sarah. You gave me purpose and meaning, a reason to build something lasting. You taught me what it means to be a husband and a father. You made me better than I was." "We made each other better," Sarah said, echoing his words from years before. "That is what love does, real love. It does not just accept you as you are, it helps you become who you are meant to be." Inside the house, they heard the sound of one of the children crying, probably William having a bad dream. Cole started to rise, but Sarah pressed him back down. "I will get him. You stay here and enjoy the quiet for a moment longer." But Cole stood anyway, taking her hand. "We will go together. That is what we do, remember? We face everything together." As they walked hand in hand back into their home, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude wash over her. The road that had led her to this moment had been difficult and painful, marked by betrayal and hardship. But it had also been necessary because without that struggle, she would never have found Cole, never have built this beautiful life. She thought about the woman she had been 7 years ago, broken and alone, carrying twins with no husband's name. And she thought about the woman she was now, loved and secure, mother to 5 beautiful children, and wife to the best man she had ever known. The transformation was almost impossible to comprehend, and yet it had happened, one day at a time, one choice at a time, built on the foundation of one cowboy's decision to show kindness to a stranger in need. That kindness had blossomed into love, and that love had created a family that would endure for generations. James and Emma would grow up knowing they were chosen and wanted, that they had a father who claimed them proudly even though he did not have to. The younger children would grow up in a home filled with love and security, never doubting their place or their worth. And someday, when they were old enough to understand, Sarah and Cole would tell them the whole story, how their family began with an act of mercy and grew into something extraordinary. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge, triumph and struggle. James grew into a young man with his father's way with horses and his mother's compassionate heart. Emma proved to have a brilliant mind and a talent for numbers, keeping the ranch books by the time she was 15. Thomas was steady and reliable, the peacemaker among his siblings. Margaret was fierce and independent, determined to prove she could do anything her brothers could do. And William, the youngest, was the dreamer, always with his nose in a book or staring at the stars. Through it all, Cole and Sarah remained the center, the foundation upon which everything else was built. Their love only deepened with time, weathering the inevitable difficulties that came with life on the frontier. There were lean years when drought threatened the cattle and the crops. There were illnesses that had Sarah sitting up all night with sick children, praying and watching and refusing to lose faith. There were disagreements and frustrations, moments when the stress of raising 5 children and running a ranch seemed overwhelming. But through every challenge, they stood together just as Cole had promised they would. When times were hard, they found ways to make each other laugh. When grief struck, as it did when Mrs. Calloway passed away in 1889, they comforted each other and honored the memory of the woman who had given Sarah a chance when few others would. When success came, as it did when Cole's horses won prizes at the state fair, they celebrated together and taught their children to be grateful rather than prideful. By 1895, James and Emma were 17 years old and preparing to make their own ways in the world. James had already proven himself as a horseman equal to his father, and several ranchers had approached Cole about hiring the young man. Emma had been accepted to a teacher's college in Austin, one of the few institutions that welcomed women, and was preparing to leave that fall. The night before Emma's departure, the whole family gathered for dinner. Sarah had cooked all of Emma's favorite foods, and the table was loud with conversation and laughter, as it always was when the Maddox clan came together. Looking around at her children, now ranging from young adults to energetic pre-teens, Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. After the meal, Emma pulled Sarah aside. "Mama, I need to tell you something." The young woman's eyes were bright with tears. "I know I am not yours by blood. James and I have always known, even though you never made us feel different from Thomas and Margaret and William. And I just wanted to tell you that it does not matter, not one bit. You are my mother in every way that counts, and I am so grateful that God brought you and Papa together." Sarah pulled her daughter into a fierce hug, her own tears flowing freely. "You and James were mine from the moment I felt you move inside me," she said. "And your father claimed you as his before you were even born. You are a Maddox, Emma, through and through. Never doubt that." "I do not doubt it," Emma assured her. "How could I, when I have been so loved my entire life? You and Papa taught me what family really means, that it is not about blood, but about commitment and love. I will carry those lessons with me wherever I go." Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed to get rest before her journey, Sarah stood in the nursery that had once held cradles for twin babies and was now a sewing room. Cole found her there, staring at the small rocking chair that had held so many children over the years. "Having a hard time letting her go?" he asked gently. "I am so proud of her," Sarah said. "Proud of both of them, of all our children. But yes, it is hard. It feels like just yesterday they were babies, and now they are almost grown." Cole wrapped his arms around her from behind. "We did good, Sarah. Look at them, all 5 of them. They are kind, hard-working, decent people. We gave them a good foundation." "We did," Sarah agreed, leaning back into his embrace. "And we did it together just like you promised we would." "I promised you a lot of things that Sunday morning 17 years ago," Cole said. "I promised those babies would have my name, that you would be my wife, that we would build a life together. I think I've kept those promises pretty well." Sarah turned in his arms to face him, cupping his face in her hands. His hair was touched with gray now, and there were lines around his eyes that had not been there when they met. But to her he was more handsome than ever. "You kept every single promise and gave me more than I ever dared to ask for. You gave me love, Cole. Real, honest, lasting love. You gave me a family and a home and a place to belong. You took my shame and turned it into honor." "There was never any shame," Cole said firmly. "Not in you, not in our children, just circumstances that needed grace and mercy. I am glad I was the one who got to give you that, Sarah. Loving you and our family has been the greatest privilege of my life." As they stood together in the fading light, Sarah thought once more about that terrified woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Redemption so many years ago, her future uncertain, her heart broken, her body carrying 2 babies who would be born into a world ready to judge them. That woman could never have imagined the life that awaited her, could never have dreamed that a cowboy's simple offer of water would lead to this beautiful, complicated, perfect life. But it had. One act of kindness had sparked a love story that had endured nearly 2 decades and produced a family that would carry on for generations. The twins who had once had no father's name now carried the name Maddox with pride, never knowing or caring that biology did not tie them to the man who had raised them. They knew only that their father loved them unconditionally, had chosen them deliberately, and had never once made them feel like anything other than his cherished children. And Sarah, who had once believed herself ruined beyond redemption, had found not just acceptance, but deep, abiding love. She had found a partner who saw her not as a fallen woman, but as a strong survivor worthy of respect and devotion. Together they had built something that transcended the harsh judgments of frontier society, proving that love could flourish even in the most unlikely circumstances. The years ahead would bring more changes and challenges. James and Emma would make their own ways, eventually marrying and giving Sarah and Cole grandchildren. The younger children would grow and leave home in their turn, following their own dreams and building their own lives. Cole and Sarah would grow old together on the ranch they had built, their love deepening and mellowing like good whiskey, becoming richer with age. but the foundation would remain constant, built that Sunday morning in 1878 when a cowboy stood before God and community and claimed a woman and her unborn twins as his own, when he promised that those babies would have his name, his protection, his love, when he chose mercy over judgment and love over convention. That choice had reverberated through the years, creating ripples that touched countless lives. Every child who grew up secure in their parents' love, every person who benefited from Sarah's compassion or Cole's integrity, every horse that was trained with patience rather than cruelty, all of it traced back to that single decision to show kindness to a stranger in need. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars emerged in their familiar patterns overhead, Sarah and Cole walked hand in hand through the home they had built together. They checked on their sleeping children, pulling blankets over restless sleepers and pressing gentle kisses to foreheads. In the morning, Emma would begin her journey to Austin and her future. But tonight, the family was all together under one roof, safe and loved and whole. And Sarah Mitchell Maddox, who had once had nothing but shame and fear, fell asleep in the arms of her husband, surrounded by the family they had created together, her heart full to overflowing with gratitude for the cowboy who had promised her twins would have his name by Sunday morning and had spent nearly 2 decades proving that his love was as permanent as the Texas stars overhead.